Okay, so I've gone ahead and I have implemented this one-to-one contact info inheritance relationship on our database. So it's no longer like this. I guess the more simplified version, what we've done is we've gone down to a very fine-grained version of the database where we've never repeated a same set of columns that has the same meaning on different entities. In fact, we have a separate entity to share those columns among multiple entities. And that allows us to potentially have the same kind of information be sort of a source, and therefore we could have the same contact being both a coach and a guardian. Hypothetically, a player and a coach. Hypothetically, a player and a guardian. It all depends on, of course, the circumstances. You know, it could be an older player being allowed to pick up their younger sibling from their soccer game. But nonetheless, you get the point. It is possible to be a little bit more flexible with our data while still having a structure that enforces the rules of reality, in essence. Our database can model true reality a little bit closer now. Now, do we need something of this complexity at a Little League? Not always. In fact, not all that commonly either. Although the guardian and coach, my father used to coach my hockey games when I was a kid, so it is very possible that maybe this is a requirement. Nonetheless, let's just have a look at the SQL side of things. I've already built the database, made the adjustments that I need to. You can see that, at least for the moment, my view still works, and that's because it doesn't deal directly with any of the contacts. Okay? So I'm going to get rid of that view output, and we're going to have a look at what we have here. We have tables. All right. So our contact info, that's the new table, the neat guy right here with the first, last, and phone number. Okay. Now what I have in here, I've also put in the address, city, and postal code. And just for the sake of argument, I put them in there because a contact would typically have more than just a phone number for contacting them. But you'll notice that when I select it all, if I have a look, most of the addresses, contacts, and postal codes are not filled in. And that's because I only had that for the player previously. So some of these are coaches and guardians who do not have that information. And I didn't really go to the trouble of getting that all set up. This isn't a real database. It's sort of made up information at this point. And so hopefully you can forgive me for not having a perfect example. But you can see I've got the columns, I've got a contact ID here. And I look in coach, and I look at my columns, but all I've got is a coach ID. And what the hell is going on here? Well, let's have a look at something. All right, so select everything from coach. All right, let's look at everything in coach. I go, holy cats, I've got 7 coaches. This is just sample data, of course. There are probably 30 or 40 coaches in the typical league, right? But I've got 7 coaches output here, and all I've got is IDs for them. Okay, well, let's select everything from contact info. I think that's what it's called, right? All right, and obviously my IntelliSense isn't updated yet, so again, just a reminder, you can go edit IntelliSense, refresh local cache, or press Shift-Control-R, and that will get rid of these red squiggly lines that lie to you and tell you that objects don't exist when you know they do. Okay. So I look at contact info, I look at coach, you see contact info is a little more full, it's got contact IDs and so on and so forth, right? And if we look back at our diagram, we can see a contact is connected to a, we're looking at coach, contact is connected to a coach in a very, I guess, subtle way, all right? We have a contact ID here. We know that's the primary key for contact info. We look at the coach table and we go, what is the primary key? Well, there's 2 ways to know which columns are part of a primary key in a table or in an entity from our data diagram. And that is, they will either have an asterisk or there will be a plus sign next to a relationship indicating that a foreign key is part of the primary key. Now in this case, we've only got the 1 plus sign, so we've got a primary key that's made up of 1 foreign key. And I've thrown in the little brackets here. This isn't quite industry standard, but I like to add a little reminder. This is what I'm going to call my foreign key field. It's going to be called coach ID. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to go, all right, well, I know there's a connection, so let's do the join here. And actually, we'll type it out, and then I'm going to show you how to quickly do it with a special tool that we haven't spent a lot of time looking at because we wanted to learn about our code first. But this is the end of the term, so let's throw a little bit of the caution to the wind and use some of the simpler tools that are available to us in SSMS for short, by the way, which is SQL Server Management Studio. But we're going to select everything from coach. All right. Then we're going to join our contact info. And how are we going to join that? Well, let's grab our contact info. Remember, I like to start with the primary key because it just makes a little more sense from the parent table. Well, how do you know what the parent table is? Well, you can see that this plus sign is saying the player table is inheriting a foreign key as its primary key from the contact table. So even though it's a one-to-one relationship, you can think of the contact info as the parent table and the player or the coach or the guardian as the child table. So let's do it in that order. We'll go contact info.contact ID is equal to the coach dot. Well, all it's got is the coach ID, and I'm pretty sure that works because when I look at my diagram, it says coach ID is equal to the primary key from contact info. Well, that's contact ID for sure. So when I run this, what happens? Well, notice my coach ID and contact ID line up every single time. Sure, I name them differently, but that is how this data is all lined up. I don't have the address, I don't have the city, I don't have the postal code, etc., etc., etc. Now, how about I want to send out a mailing to all of my peoples in the soccer database about a royal gala or a charity event or something? Well, all I have to do now, instead of using that union query, is I can just grab everything from contact info. So that's one of the advantages to kind of centralizing that information. So we've got all of our players, we've got all of our coaches and so on. There is a little bit of a problem in that, well, we don't want to mail to players and their parents, we want to mail to just one or the other. But that's a problem for another day. Right now, what we might want to do is, okay, that's all the coaches, but you notice it didn't pull out all of the contacts here. All it did was pull out the coach information. So now, because we joined on coach and we used an inner join, which only gets the things that overlap in that Venn diagram situation, right? Where we have coaches that have a matching ID to contact info, we have a new record made up of a combination of those two pieces of information. But we don't have the player information, we don't have the guardian information, and we don't have any unlikely but potential orphan contact information, right? What if we want to get all contacts who were not players? Well, let's select everything from contact info. All right, so we've got everything in contact info. Now there's two ways we can do this. We could say left join to say that we're doing everything from the left side of this join, which is, if we look at this in reading order, makes that the contact information. So we're saying we want everything from contact info. That's my most significant piece of information right now. And I'm going to join in my player table on our same relationship. Contact info's contact ID is equal to the player's player ID. Oh, and I forgot my equal sign. All right. And then we don't want to include just contacts that have players, but we also want to include contacts that do not have players. Now you can see here we've got player ID null and player ID exists, right? Now we know because we looked at the data before that all of our players have address information, all of our non-players do not, so that makes it even easier to see. But the real piece of information we're looking at is just from the player table, right? So let's grab our player information and say, look, where our player ID is not null, or is null. And then that'll grab just of our coaches and our guardians, and the players will be excluded. Now we have got that mailing out to the players' guardians. There's another simpler way we could have done it. We can just say select star from contact info where contact ID is not in, and then we'll grab our player ID from. player. Depending on who you are, that might seem simpler. To me, that does seem a little bit simpler mentally to just sort of sort through in my head. And you could also use the exists, but as we're aware, when we use the information from the outer query on the inner query or on our subquery, then there's a little bit more of a performance hit. So I'd like to shy away from the exists query in that case. And since I promised, I am going to go over the how to use a query designer to build these queries, but I'm just going to hit stop for a second and do that in another video.